Ah, the Caribbean islands. The sand, the surf, and the sunburned tourists with their questionably appropriated cornrows. People take cruises to escape monotony of everyday life and as an excuse to drink and eat in excess. When the Bradley family left their home in Virginia for their relaxing adventure on the Royal Caribbean cruise, they had no idea that their dream vacation would quickly turn into a waking nightmare. This is the disturbing disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley. On March 21st, 1998, the Bradley family eagerly waited to aboard the giant cruise ship called the RHAPSODY of the Seas. The Bradleys were a family of 4 from Virginia who'd been planning this vacay for a while, and they were totally ready to escape their mundane work week for a few days of the Caribbean coasting. Ron and Iva Bradley were super stoked to be taking their 2 adult children, Amy and Brad, on a cruise from Puerto Rico to Aruba. 23-year-old Amy had an absolute blast partying it up on the cruise ship, and on the night of the 23rd, the ship docked just off the shore of Curacao, with fun activities in store for the following day. That night, Amy and Brad hung out in the ship's club while the cruise ship's band called Blue Orchid played. Amy ended up chatting and dancing with the band's bass player, Alistair Douglas, who they call Yellow, after the two seemed to hit it off. At around 1 a.m., the Bradleys called it a night and headed back to their family's cabin together. They all got back to the cabin, said goodnight, and hit the bunks. The Bradleys opted for one of the bigger staterooms on the cruise, so it had multiple rooms as opposed to them all sharing one. That night, they said their I love yous and shut their doors. At around 5:30 in the morning, Amy's dad, Ron, woke up to see her lounging on the balcony of their cabin, and he closed his eyes and rolled back over for a few more minutes of shut-eye. And less than 30 minutes later, he looked back to the balcony and Amy was gone. So Ron got up thinking that maybe Amy went back to her room or something, but her bed was empty. And then he noticed that her cigarettes and lighter were missing, but besides that, she hadn't taken anything else with her. Double uh-oh. Even her sandals sat there on the floor as if she had just slipped them off. And 3 strikes, it's time to panic. Seeing the sandals and no sign of Amy, the family tried to think of a logical reason why Amy could have slipped away. But all of them knew deep down that this was not like her at all. Besides, it was 6 in the morning. It's not like there was anything to do on the ship besides get breakfast. So the family was trying not to panic, and they started to look around all the common areas of the ship, while the ship began to dock in Curacao. They couldn't find Amy in any of the common areas, and right around that time, they heard the gangplank start to lower with the announcement going out to the guests that they were now able to leave the ship. What's gangplank?
It's like the walkway.
Oh,
Yeah.
Got it. And at this point, they'd started to consider some more sinister options, like what if someone had tried to smuggle her off the ship? So the family begged the staff to cancel the docking until Amy was found, but the staff ignored them and allowed both passengers and crew off the ship and onto the island. Please lower your head and watch your step as you exit the cruise ship, and just ignore the family that's panicking in the corner. We don't want to take away from your experience in Curacao. If Amy, for some reason, had decided to sneak off that morning, then now she had the perfect opportunity to slip away off the ship. But Amy's family didn't believe that possibility for a second. The staff even told them that she had probably just gotten up early to go explore the island. Or maybe she wanted to escape her life back home and just ran off. It wasn't uncommon for passengers who have done that before. I can't believe people would suspect a 23-year-old woman to choose a cruise ship as her way of starting a new life off the grid. I just don't buy that. And Amy's family too told them absolutely not, and here's why. Amy had just gotten a new job that she was super excited about, and she had also moved into this dope new apartment with her bulldog, who she couldn't live without. They said that her dog was her life, and she would never leave it behind. I totally get it. If this world becomes too much and I decide to leave it all for the Alaskan wilderness, my dog is for sure coming with me. The cruise ship staff remained completely unhelpful, which is going to be a theme throughout the whole story. And the Bradley family was forced to continue the search on their own. The family also got off and searched tirelessly around Curacao, asking if any locals had seen her, but of course it was as if she had just vanished. After the cruise ship let all the passengers off, they then decided to page the staff about the missing woman. Apparently the staff didn't want to announce her disappearance or hang any photos of her on the ship because they thought it might be upsetting to the other guests. Like, what? The crew also ended up searching the common areas and didn't look through any staff or passenger cabins. They posed the theory that Amy had fallen overboard, but her family quickly shut that down. Amy was a trained lifeguard and an excellent swimmer, and the ship was docked very closely to shore and would have been an easy swim to safety if she had somehow ended up in the water. Investigators also concluded that there was just no way that she could have fallen over unless she was purposely climbing over and jumped in. And Amy had no reason to do that. That night, the Rhapsody of the Sea was ready to depart, and the Bradley family decided to leave the ship and stay in Curacao and continue their search. They said that they were done dealing with the unhelpful cruise ship staff and decided to take matters into their own hands, which they were right to do because it took 2 whole days before the FBI even got involved and boarded the cruise ship to begin their investigation. One of the worst parts about going missing at sea is that you don't have the local police that you can just call and file a report with. You're in international waters, my friend. You've heard from other stories how complicated missing person investigations and paperwork can be, especially with different jurisdictions, so a disappearance at sea is a whole different crab cake. The FBI did an extensive search of the water and the harbor around Curacao, but they didn't find any evidence of someone having fallen in. So the family zeroed in on the cruise ship staff and started to remember a few instances that struck them as fishy. They told the authorities that the staff was really friendly with Amy and had noticed certain crew members giving her special attention. A lot of the staff knew Amy by name, and some were flirty with her and even invited her to hang out with them. Amy's dad said that one night when they were at dinner, a waiter told her that they wanted to take her to this restaurant called Carlos and Charlie's when they docked in Aruba, which is totally creepy because Carlos and Charlie's is the same restaurant where an 18-year-old American girl named Natalie Holloway disappeared in 2005. Ron even asked his daughter if she planned on going to the restaurant, and Amy said she wouldn't do anything with the crew members because they gave her the creeps. And we always trust a woman's intuition. Eventually, investigators began to interview passengers of the ship, and witnesses say they saw Amy early that morning in the elevator with Yellow, the bassist from the ship's band. Surveillance footage from the party from the night before showed Yellow and Amy slow dancing together and holding hands. At 6 a.m., Yellow was awoken by authorities pounding on his door asking if he had seen Amy. Yellow said that they had gotten drinks together, but at around 1 a.m., they said goodnight. He went to the staff elevator and Amy went to the opposite direction. Other witnesses said that they saw Amy heading to the top deck along with her cigarettes and lighter to have a smoke. Another detail that emerged from Bradley's was that on the night of the party, they saw a group of passengers along with a dance troupe aboard the ship. The family said the people just kind of walked around and stood around the outside of the party and watched everyone dance, and they thought it was kind of sketchy for the cruise ship to just allow some randos onto the ship. Amy's mom also brought up another incident from the cruise that stood out to her. So the ship had this photo gallery where they would lay out all the candids and formal photos that had been taken of the passengers, and you could walk around and through the halls of the prints and pick out any one you wanted to purchase. Amy and her mom went one day and looked at the photos when they realized that every photo of Amy had been missing from the shelves. The cashier at the time even remembered how strange this was because she said she distinctly remembers developing the photos of Amy herself. The worker backed up this story to the investigators and said she had to print the photos for a second time to give to Amy. A theory was posed by investigators that Amy maybe saw something that she wasn't supposed to see, and somehow silenced. But of course, this was a theory that they had no grounds to go on and couldn't prove at this point in the investigation. Amy had no history of depression or mental illness and was getting ready to begin an exciting new chapter in her life, so investigators knew she didn't jump over the railing. But after virtually no other leads, detectives were stumped. In the following months, the Bradleys wrote to congressmen, the White House, and foreign officials. They hired private detectives and started a 24-hour hotline. And to this day, 23 years later, we still have no idea what happened to Amy Lynn Bradley. There have, however, been possible sightings of Amy reported since she disappeared, and some have been deemed legit by the Bradleys and investigators. But every time investigators would arrive at the scene, Amy, or the Amy lookalike, was gone. So let's go over these sightings. The first sighting came in 5 months after she was reported missing, when 2 Canadian tourists reported seeing her on a beach in Curacao. They said the woman was walking around while closely followed by 2 men. They reported that when the woman heard the 2 tourists speaking English, she tried to go up to talk to them, but the men dragged her away. The tourists were able to accurately describe Amy's distinct tattoos and all of their correct placements and said they were 100% sure it was her. In 1999, the second reported sighting of Amy came in when a member of the Navy visited a brothel in Curacao and said a woman begged him for help and told him that her name was Amy Lynn Bradley. But get this, he didn't report it because he was afraid he would get in trouble. It wasn't until he saw Amy's face on the cover of a People magazine when he decided to say something, and it had already been months since that incident. And then, as if this poor family hadn't been through the ringer enough, they got a promising lead that turns out to be a scam. Some douchebag named Frank Jones claimed to be a former Army Special Forces officer and said he could rescue Amy from an armed crew that was holding her in Curacao. So the Bradleys gave the guy $200,000 for him to fly out and save their daughter before they realized that it was all a load of barnacles. Ron said that it was a chance they had to take. The sightings didn't stop here though, and they were about to get a lot scarier. In 2005, Amy was said to have been spotted again, this time in a department store in Barbados. A woman was using the restroom when she claimed two men burst in and started threatening the woman in the stall next to her, saying she was ruining a deal. The lady carefully exited her stall and saw a woman hunched over the sink crying. When the woman approached the sink, the crying woman turned and said she was from Virginia and her name was Amy. All of a sudden, the two men burst back into the restroom and dragged her out the door. The lady was so shook and immediately called the authorities and gave descriptions of the woman and the two men. They drew sketches based on the details given by the woman, and when they're released, the sketch of the woman looks like freaking Amy. This is one of the few cases where it feels like these sightings are actually legit, and somehow she slips away every single time. That same year, 7 years after their only daughter had gone missing, Ron and Iva received a horrifying yet incredible lead in the form of a photo in their email. It was an email sent from a member of an organization that locates victims of human trafficking on adult websites, and the person said they found a photo on the website that looked a whole heck of a lot like Amy. The family opened the photo and saw a woman posing in little clothing on a bed, and their jaws dropped. The woman bore a striking resemblance to Amy. The woman in the photograph was identified as Jazz, a hustler in the Caribbean, and although it seemed like the Bradleys finally found Amy, the unsettling photo still hasn't been able to help them get any closer to solving the case. Independent web sleuths have even gone so far as to compare and analyze bone structure, eyebrows, and earlobe shapes on the picture to prove that it is Amy. There's also been rumors of some unsavory deals that happen amongst cruise ship workers and traffickers in the Caribbean, which makes the details about the flirty waiters and the missing photos a bit spookier. Despite how highly publicized Amy's case has been, there are still shockingly few leads to go on. It seemed like whoever knew what happened did a very good job of covering it up. This has led a lot of people to speculate about the Royal Caribbean cruise lines. Like, why would they lie where they searched? Why were they uncooperative every step of the way? Were they complicit in a cover-up? Amy's mom to this day says that in her gut she believes that someone saw Amy and wanted her, so they took her. Amy's brother Brad recalled that the last thing he ever said to his sister was that he loved her, and he found a lot of comfort in that. The investigation is still ongoing today, and the FBI and Bradley family both have reward offers for any information on her whereabouts. But for now, it still remains a mystery. Sadly, Amy's disappearance isn't the only one like this. She joined the ranks of hundreds of other people who have been gone missing at sea aboard cruise ships in the Caribbean. The investigation is still ongoing today, and the FBI and Bradley family both have reward offers for any information on her whereabouts, but for now, it still remains a mystery. And that, my dear friends, is the disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley. Amy had her whole life ahead of her, and her family won't rest until they know what actually happened to her that fateful early morning. Do you think that the crew was involved? What about the bass player? I still think that the whole investigation on the ship seems a little too fishy. You know what isn't too fishy though? These crabless crab cakes. Bon appetit, biters.